as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That famous verse, right? That we all talk about. Well, what's the context? It's not really a happy context. This is a confrontation of idolatry. And we're going to spend all our time on Joshua 24. So in Joshua 24, this is a important passage because this is right before Israel. So this is after Moses has died, Joshua has taken over, and they're about to enter the promised land. And to paint the scene of what's happened up to this point, we understand that this is during the context of the Mosaic covenant. And the Mosaic covenant, it's like a contract. It's a bilateral contract. You do things, you obey God, blessings. You don't obey God, curses. And these curses are, usually expressed through physical manifestation. So you might literally get sick. Your land will get, have famine, etc., right? And so there was a point where Moses and the Levitical priests brought Israel together because they were not obeying the Mosaic covenant. And we see this first pop up in Deuteronomy 27. So I'll read the passage for you. Deuteronomy 27, verses 9 through 12. It says, Then Moses and the Levitical priests said to all Israel, Keep silence and hear, O Israel. This day you have become the people of the Lord your God. You shall therefore obey the voice of the Lord your God and keep his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today. That day Moses charged the people, saying, When you have crossed over the Jordan, these shall stand on Mount Gerizim to bless the people. Now, there's two mountains. One was called Mount Gerizim. The other one was called Mount Ebal. And this Mount Gerizim symbolized for Israel blessings. It was like the mountain of blessings, while Mount Ebal was the mountain of curses, correlating with the Mosaic law. And so this is almost like an object lesson. He's literally standing in Mount Gerizim, and Moses is telling his people, Israel, hey, you have to obey God's commandment and his statutes in order to get his Gerizim or blessings when you cross over the Jordan. But if you don't, the implication, if you don't obey God, then you're going to be in the curses like Mount Ebal. Right? It's literally using two mountains as illustrations of one's blessing, one is curses. So that's what Moses did for Israel. You fast forward and Joshua does the same exercise in Joshua chapter 8. He repeats what Moses did in Joshua chapter 8, verse 30 to 33, and I'll read that passage and just picture along. At that time, Joshua built an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, on Mount Ebal. What is Mount Ebal? Curses. Just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the people of Israel, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones upon which no man has wielded an iron tool, and he offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord and sacrificed peace offerings. And there in the presence of the people of Israel, he wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses, which he had written. And all Israel, sojourner as well as native born, with their elders and officers and their judges, stood on opposite sides of the ark before the Levitical priests, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, half of them in front of Mount Gerizim, half of them in front of Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded at the first to bless the people of Israel. So what is Joshua doing? He's doing what Moses did back in Deuteronomy. He's doing the same exercise. He splits up half the people on one side, half here, with the ark of the covenant in between. And this is as if he is saying, choose. Do you want to choose curses? You want to choose blessings? Well, you know the conditions. If you want blessings, you need to obey what? The covenant. But if you don't, you're going to get curses. Right? It's a physical exercise, a reminding of Israel of what they already knew. This is not new information. Right? Think of how many decades have already passed since Moses first brought the covenant. They know the commandments of God. They know the Ark of the Covenant. They know all of the rules and regulation that God has given to them. So Moses did this exercise. Joshua does it in Joshua chapter 8. And then finally, Joshua does it one last time before they enter the promised land in Joshua 24. So let's look at Joshua 24. He renews the covenant at Shechem. Shechem is a place in between Mount Ebal and Gerizim. And he says this starting in verse 14. Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. So this is what Joshua is saying. Remove your idols. Keep in mind, they haven't just escaped Israel. This is 40 years later. So what does Joshua say? What is he implying by saying this? Saying, I know you're still worshiping the idols from Egypt. I mean, we've already seen evidence of that where they mix the picture of Yahweh with the golden calf, which is one of the gods of Egypt. But you could say, oh, that generation has died by that point because we know because of their disobedience, the original generation, none of them were able to go into the promised land except for who? Two, Joshua and Caleb. So Joshua and Caleb has the next generation, and yet the next generation still hasn't learned from the parents' generation. They still have the gods from Egypt. So Joshua's calling them out as if to remind them, hey, remember Gerizim, Ebal? Third time's a charm, hopefully. You could get blessings in the promised land if you will just listen to God and obey his commandments. But you're going to get curses if you don't. Remember, Israel, it's your choice. So he tells them, put away the gods. And then verse 15, and if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve. Right? Standing in the middle, choose who are you going to serve. You want to serve Yahweh with Gerizim blessings, or are you going to serve your idols and Ebal curses? The gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That famous verse, right? That we all talk about. Well, what's the context? It's not really a happy context. This is a confrontation of idolatry. We know we are choosing this. Joshua said, my house, so we're going to choose the Gerizim blessing because we know that's why we don't worship idols. But you have to make that decision right now before you step into the promised land, because I'm reminding you, if you step into the promised land and you still are holding on to the idols of your past, you're not going to get blessings. In fact, you're going to get curses. He's warning them, giving them a chance to repent, in other words, telling them to remove their idols. Look at how they respond in verse 16 through 17. Then the people answered, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods, for it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight and preserved us in all the way that we went and among all the peoples through whom we passed. Sounds like a good answer, doesn't it? All right. If I was Joshua, I'd be like, A+, let's go. You did it. Good answer. You said you will never, serve the old idols like your parents did. We're going to go in, you're going to get blessings. What does Joshua say? You are not able to serve the Lord. Wait a minute. Joshua, I think you have a hearing problem. They just said they're not going to serve the idols from Egypt, the idols of the Amorites, which was infiltrating, right? Egypt from the past, Amorites, their present idols. They just said they're not going to worship any of these idols. They're going to only serve Yahweh. They know who's the one that took them out of Egypt, did all these miracles. They know the Passover story. They know all of that. They have the right knowledge about Yahweh. But what is Joshua trying to get at? He knows that they know the answer, but he knows nothing's changed in them. Because what? It's not enough to know. It's what matters is that changing? Have you gotten rid of your idols? And Joshua's trying to make the point, you haven't gotten rid of your idols, even though you're telling me the right answers right now.